Hi everyone, I'm Jillian, and I did my research proposal on an investigation of Adderall abuse in the University of California college system. So some background on Adderall. It is a central nervous system stimulant, mostly prescribed to people with ADHD. Some prescriptions are given for people with narcolepsy to help them stay awake during the day. Adderall is also called a cognitive enhancer because it increases wakefulness, motivation, aspects of cognition, learning, and memory. It's classified as an amphetamine, which is a Schedule II non-narcotic drug as classified by the DEA here in the United States. An example of a Schedule I narcotic drug is morphine, just for reference of where, Adderall lies on the spectrum. So you know, research some facts. 54 Americans are estimated to use prescription medications for non-medical reasons at least once in their lives. In 2014, 30% of those who use prescriptions for non-medical reasons for the first time were adolescents. So that's over a quarter of our population, ages 12 to 20, that are using prescriptions for non-medical reasons. Non-medical use of prescriptions is the highest in the 18 to 24-year-old range, including Adderall, 18 to 25-year-old range, which is our college students. The biggest Adderall abuse increase was from 2009 to 2013. Even though it is still an issue today, it's not the forefront of our prescription abuse problem. That, I believe, would be the opioid crisis, which I'm sure many people have heard of through the news. Continuing on, in 2015, stimulants were misused at the estimated rate of every 2 for 100 persons. Colleges, medical schools, and dental schools reported a range of 8.1% to 43% of Adderall misuse by students. And between 2000 and 2009, there were 8,265 drug-related deaths in LA County, with 61% of the deaths involving drug abuse, either prescription or over-the-counter, and Adderall was included in those statistics for the 8,265 deaths in LA County. Moving on to literature, I didn't find very many articles and research studies that were specific to the University of California system, which is why I focused my proposal on that. But I did find this one about an internal study at UC Berkeley that found that the prevalence of misuse was 17% among the student body, and 75% of those misusers started their Adderall misuse in college, for reasons such as the extra stress in college, being away from their parents and not having their parents watch over every move that they make. Out of 303 students, 36% of the sample used prescription drugs for non-medical use, and 72% of those who misused prescriptions used stimulants, which includes Adderall. In one study that I found, another study that surveyed 390 students found that 7.5% of the participants admitted to non-prescribed stimulant use in the last month. So that's using somebody else's medications. Another study of a survey of 400 students found that over 11% of the respondents reported using Adderall in a non-prescription use at some point in their life. Another survey, 243 responses, found that Adderall was the most commonly reported stimulant use for non-medical reasons at 77%. And this last one that I found was of a Southern California public university with about 1,600 students that responded and said that 11% of them reported past year recreational use and 4% reported past month recreational use of stimulants. So you can see that the Adderall culture is pretty wide at different colleges of different sizes. I don't have the names of the colleges because of privacy reasons. They weren't listed in the studies that I read. It just said, a college on the East Coast, a college in a small town, a college in a big major city. But for this proposal, I do want to be specific to the UC system. Continuing on, a Twitter survey from November 2011 to May 2012 found over 200,000 tweets from 132,099 different accounts that contain the word Adderall, with a peak during exam periods, which we put together the researchers put together was related to stress the higher stress that occurs during the exam periods. Another web-based survey of 308 medical profession students found that over 10% of them had used a stimulant in the past or were currently using one. Over 70% of them who had used a stimulant had used Adderall, which was the most common stimulant used. So even our medical professional students that know the dangers of prescription drug abuse are using it because they're stressed out too, with keeping up good grades and learning all of their material and internships and so on. In a study of dental and dental hygiene students found that females were more likely than men to abuse Adderall. The researchers found that females are more likely because they, especially in the medical schools, because of the stigma towards women in medicine and the traditional stereotype of a doctor being male. And so women were feeling more pressure to succeed and improve themselves. Some common reasons I found for Adderall abuse: pressure to succeed, social cultural expectations from parents and family members, the collegiate lifestyle of balancing a social life, job, internship, extracurricular activities, and academics, accessibility to prescription stimulants from friends, as we'll talk about in a minute, help with concentration, help with studying, increased alertness, get high, and to experiment and see what the quote-unquote Adderall culture is all about. Some of the sources of Adderall are family members and friends, significant others, strangers, and friends of friends, possibly also quote-unquote drug dealers. If you don't know them, but you hear about it from word of mouth from Joe Smith, and he can tell you about his friend Bob, and Bob can tell you about his friend Adam, and so forth. Some of the ethical issues related to Adderall abuse on college campuses. Some colleges list it as a form of cheating and academic dishonesty, because if you're taking Adderall and don't have a diagnosis of ADHD and have your own prescription for Adderall, it can be seen as giving that student an unfair advantage to focus and concentrate and be able to stay up all night and cram and be able to focus and not be tired. Some schools have banished Adderall from their student health centers, and their student health center doctors are not able to prescribe for Adderall. So this is good and bad, because if a student presents to the clinic with fake ADHD symptoms looking for Adderall, the doctor won't fall into the trap of prescribing a student who doesn't really need Adderall. But it's also harmful, because if there is a student that becomes a patient and does have a valid diagnosis of ADHD and needs an Adderall prescription, they'll have to go off campus to some other type of doctor to get help, and they couldn't benefit from their student health center. And some colleges also have students who have a valid ADHD diagnosis and Adderall prescription sign contracts stating they won't sell their pills or give them to their friends, which I think is a really interesting project. The research, so given all this, my research statement is this proposed research study aims to find out what the prevalence of Adderall abuse on the UC college campuses for students ages 18 to 24 as a means of coping with stress. Additionally, this study will also explore why students turn to Adderall to cope with stress instead of proper coping mechanisms such as talk therapy, yoga, and exercise. And lastly, this study will look to expand on existing nationwide knowledge, as we just looked through on the literature review slides, but specifically focus on students ages 18 to 24 in the UC system, since data is lacking specifically to the UC system. The methodology, again, college students ages 18 to 24 at one of the University of California college campuses, but then we'll replicate that 9 times so that each of the 10 campuses that I have listed on the screen has their own study done. The funding for this study will be by a University of California system grant from the health centers at each campus to see what the health centers can do to better serve their students and hopefully curb this Adderall abuse culture. Students who complete the emailed survey will be entered for a $50 gift card drawing to the bookstore, which will be selected after the study is all done. And students who participate in the in-person interviews will be given a $25 gift card to the bookstore. My quantitative data will come from the survey responses. The goal is about 100 per campus for a total of about 1,000 responses. They'll be emailed out to students anonymously, and there's about over 200,000 students in the whole UC system. Qualitative data will be in-person interviews as a follow-up with a goal of 20 students per campus. We'll use the health belief model to understand students' reasoning for taking Adderall, test their understanding of the consequences of abusing Adderall, and see if they're ready to stop abusing Adderall, or help their friends stop abusing Adderall. The perceived susceptibility questions that will be asked in the emailed survey and followed up with the in-person interviews will be, do you think you'll become addicted to Adderall? Do you think you would get caught cheating if you were to abuse Adderall? To see kind of how likely the students think they are to experience the consequences of abusing Adderall on campus. Next, the perceived severity, which is their opinion of how serious a condition and its consequences are. Some of the questions will be, do you think you would get arrested for abusing Adderall? Do you think you'd get kicked out of school for abusing Adderall? Just, you know, do the students think that those punishments would necessarily happen to them? The perceived barriers, do you think you could stop taking Adderall right now? Do you think you would suffer from withdrawal? Do you think you understand the long-term consequences of Adderall abuse? Again, the perceived barriers are one's opinion of the tangible and psychological costs of the advised action. You know, how do you think this will affect you really in the long term? And also short term with the withdrawal. Keys to action, do you know where to go to get help to stop abusing Adderall? Did you know stress can be lowered with yoga, talk therapy, exercise, and a good diet? Really asking students questions to kind of get their mind thinking about other ways they can cope with stress other than Adderall. And lastly, we will have IRB consent and approval at each campus and UC-wide. Participants will sign an electronic consent and then an in-person consent if they are selected for the in-person interview. The ethical considerations related to this project are access to health. Campus physicians and therapists will make sure that students know where they can go to get help to either stop taking Adderall or to find resources for their friends to stop taking Adderall. And of course, confidentiality of all responses will be maintained at all times. Our assumptions are we're assuming that students are all telling the truth on their responses and that they are actual participants, that they are students in the UC system, ages 18 to 24. The validity and reliability, there will be one researcher conducting the interviews, which will be recorded, and then another researcher will listen to the recordings and make sure that the data that was transcribed was the same that the researcher who conducted the interviews and collected data, that those data match. The limitations from the study is not every student in the UC system will be interviewed, so we are going to have to be generalizing since we are looking at a small population. And we're not taking into consideration other drugs that students may be misusing. As we know, there are plenty of drugs on this planet that people find ways to get high off of. But this study is just looking at Adderall. And these last few slides here are just my references for this presentation and my paper overall. Thank you very much.